One of the hymns I remember since I was a boy, and probably many of you have heard it, it's when we walk with the Lord in the light of His Word, what a glory He sheds on our way. While we do His good will, He abides with us still and with all who will trust and obey. And then the chorus goes, trust and obey, for there's no other way to be happy in Jesus but to trust and obey. Now today we're standing at the site of ancient Joppa in Israel, which goes back about 4,000 years. And we want to talk a little bit about obedience today. Now, of course, Joppa is famous also for the account in Acts chapter 10, where Peter stayed at the house of Simon the tanner, and God sent a vision from heaven and eventually sent Peter to minister to the household of Cornelius up in Caesarea, which is up along the coast of the Mediterranean. And of course today modern Tel Aviv is in the background. A little bit hazy today, can't see it all that clearly, but we're standing on the site of ancient Joppa. Now it was from Joppa that Jonah had his problems at one particular point in time, because it says that the word of the Lord came, and this is in Jonah chapter 1, to Jonah. It said, go and speak to Nineveh, that great city, and cry out to it because of their wickedness. So God gave Jonah some specific instructions of what he was to do. But notice what verse 3 says. It says, but Jonah, instead of obeying the Lord, Jonah decided he'd do what he wanted to do. So it's rather interesting the way it's written. It says, Jonah arose to flee from the presence of the Lord to go to Tarshish. It says he went down to Joppa. Now this is Joppa. This is where he came, because this is the seacoast. As you can see, the Mediterranean in the background. It says Jonah went down to Joppa, and he found a ship going to Tarshish. And he says he paid the fare. Then it says he went down into the ship to go with them to Tarshish, going from the presence of the Lord. He didn't want to obey God. He decided that his idea was better. Goes on to say in the story, but the Lord sent a great wind on the sea. And somewhere up the coast of the Mediterranean, the wind came up and the storm began to rage. And the sailors were terrified because they thought for sure their ship was going down. In fact, they wondered if there was some particular reason why their ship was in so much trouble. And if you're familiar with the story, you know that they cast lots, and it says the lot fell on Jonah. And they found that he was the guilty one, and he confessed that he was running away from the presence of the Lord. That he was not there to obey God. Now, it's rather interesting when we have read that account. You know, whenever we disobey God, we are going in the wrong direction. It says when Jonah decided to disobey God, he went down to Joppa, he went down to the ship, and eventually went down into the very innermost part of the ship, but it was down, down, down. And you know the story. Eventually, he was thrown overboard and went down into the belly of the great fish that God had prepared. But his lot was not a very happy one, and eventually the story turns around. The Lord appeared to Jonah a second time, and then he did obey God, and the city was turned back to the Lord. But simply to say that, you know, to obey the Lord is always the best thing that we can do. He said, on one hand you can have blessing, on the other hand there's cursing, and he says it's all tied up in obeying the Lord your God. He said if you obey the Lord and walk with Him, you'll have blessing upon your life, things will go well. But if you disobey God, you're going to have all kinds of problems. You see, our lives, God has made us. God has put us together. And if you were to buy a new automobile, for example, along with it would come a manufacturer's handbook. And that book would tell you, if you change the oil regularly and you service the car regularly and you do the things you're supposed to do, that you'll get the best life out of that automobile by doing the things that the manufacturer suggests you should do. You know, it's the same in our lives. We've got a book, and it's, well, we call it the Bible, but it's really the manufacturer's handbook. It's God's instructions to live a happy, successful, fulfilled life. And as we obey God, as we do what God asks us to do, we will have the best quality of life possible. And God isn't there to make us miserable. God's not there to make us walk a narrow road to kind of withhold something good from us. If we will obey the Lord, if we'll do what He would have us to do, then we will have the most successful and the best quality of life possibly. So we would challenge you. Whatever the Lord says to you, do it. And when I was a boy in Sunday school, I remember singing a song that was about Jonah, and it said something like this: I don't want to be a Jonah and get swallowed by a whale. Off to Nineveh I will go, as the Lord commands me so, and I'll shout aloud, you must be born again. Well, that's kind of a boys and girls song that says, I want to obey the Lord. Now, we want to just challenge you. And of course, one of the great things the Lord says is to open our hearts to receive Him, to trust Him. And when you put your faith and trust in the Lord and walk in obedience to Him, you'll have the best quality of life possible. And the story of Jonah teaches us all about that. It's best to obey the Lord.